She put a pot on she hair and gone. Them a the first one out on the dam. Basket on she head, bucket in each hand. Hold up on she frock, I wanna she grandson. To the market, them a go. For the morning, the day is dawning. For cock-a-crow to give the villagers a warning. Rise and shine, the birds them a sing. All animal take turn as them join in the waking. Cock-a-crow, dog-a-bark, donkey bray, horse and they even duck-a-quack. Cock-a-crow, dog-a-bark, donkey bray, horse and they even duck-a-quack. Come and hear this sweet story that tell the people about life in the country. All day a back down, me now a come home. The naga jackass yard for fetch the load. Cockle shy hand, bag over shoulder, running by his side, a Rexy and Rover. From the farm, them a come. Sun a go down but up the river. Some washing clothes, some folks are bathing at the water. Fisherman, they catch them a bring. From a canoe boat, man, them start offloading. Aymara, Kwakwari, Hail Baka Kuma Kuma, even Lokonani. Aymara, Kwakwari, Hail Baka Kuma Kuma, even Bangameri. Listen to this sweet story that tell the people about life in the country. Them children glad when the weekend come. Out in the yard, them all gather round. Some a play catcher, some making house from straw. Two who come later, a grandma or grandpa. All a sit down just a wait. Moonlight so bright, it's just the right time to listen story or to say a little nursery rhyme. Grandpa voice a echo in the night as he tell you tell some picnic a there with fright. Oh Ligan, Mungeza, Massa Kurma Burra Nancy even Watamuma. Oh Ligan, Mungeza, Massa Kurma Burra Nancy even Watamuma.
All right. Hey, guess what? Good evening. It's just 2 or maybe 3 minutes after 7 o'clock. We just have this special interview, special program. You know, we are not usually on the weekends, but as you know, with things happening, we just cannot take a break at times. We just have to give you what it is, whether it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We've got to be on the ball with you. So, before we get into our subject matter, which is the fire at the Brickdam police station that gutted maybe 95% of the police station, I just want to bring this to your attention. A teacher dies after C-section at the New Amsterdam hospital. Investigations on the way. It's the usual thing. Investigations on the way. I hope we're not returning to the days when these things are the norm. I just hope that is not the case and that this is an isolated incident. I do hope that it is. But one of the things that they're saying is that an investigations underway. I don't know underway to where. I don't know who's investigating this, but this is a sad situation. So the relatives of this teacher, Jasnet Celine Mohammed Osborne. Sad news indeed. And our deepest condolences to the family members of this beautiful young woman, this teacher who died as a result of or during C-section at the New Amsterdam hospital. Gosh, this is very, very heartbreaking. Again, condolences to the relatives of this beautiful young teacher who is no more on earth. No more, she's gone. And now let's take a quick look at this before we get to our guest, attorney at law Nigel Hughes. and that we give you guys an opportunity to share the link. And we thank you so much for sharing the link. Now, look at this. There's another case, murder of electrician. Again, condolences to this young man, his family. Sorry, condolences to his family. I was told that he buried already. This is a sad situation. Young man on his way to work, he was robbed, shot, and killed. The two suspects shot dead by police. The first police report is that they were shot and killed during a stakeout. And then that stakeout now changed to shoot out. Now, I don't know if these two suspects are the culprits. I don't know. But what I do know is that a lot of people, quote unquote, suspects in crimes, quote unquote, police say suspects in crime, were shot and killed. So I don't know what are the circumstances here, whether these suspects are indeed the correct suspects. I don't know whether there was any sort of shootout with the police. I don't know. I just don't know. But what I do know is that this young man lost his life. Condolences to the family members again. Sad situation. Good evening to all of you. My name is Mark Benchap, and welcome to this special program. Again, thank you so much for sharing the link. We're going to rock and roll with you for about an hour with my guest this evening, no stranger to you guys, attorney at law. I like to use that term, prominent attorney at law, Nigel Hughes. Mr. Nigel Hughes is with us, and we want to talk about this situation. So hopefully our operator will get Mr. Nigel Hughes on screen so that we can rock and roll and talk about this fire. This is serious stuff. Again, let's welcome attorney Nigel Hughes. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mark. Always a pleasure to be in your program. Thank you very much for inviting me on again.
Thank you so much for accepting, even if I call you 10 minutes or half hour, an hour, you're always 99% of the time, you're like, I'm going to get on with you, because you share all these important information to people. You break things down for people from a legal standpoint, and all of us appreciate your time, sir.
You're very kind. Thank you.
Now, before we get into the fire, I want to get an update on Orrin Boston shooting to death, the killing of Orrin Boston by members of the SWAT team. What's the situation, sir?
Well, Mark, all I can say is that we have not, neither has the family, been contacted by the police to inform them about what state the investigation is at. We were up in Dartmouth this week, taking further statements from the various witnesses who were there, because, of course, we're running our own investigation with a view to, if necessary, commencing legal proceedings, private criminal legal proceedings, if the state decides it's not going to do so.
I mean, you've been practicing law for quite some time now. Does it bother you, Mr. Hughes, that the investigation on the police part is taking like a snail-like approach in dealing with this matter?
Let me say it concerns me, and I certainly don't think that this is a complex investigation. This is not a case where the identity of the person who actually fired the shot is in question. This is not a case where the circumstances of the shooting are in doubt. So I can't imagine what would take this long. This is not a case where you're trying to find out whether the scientific evidence leads to a particular suspect. All these questions you don't have to address here. And I would imagine by now, certainly within 3-4 days of the killing, they would have had all the necessary information to be able to have gathered the appropriate advice and institute charges.
I know, but apart from that, this is a clear case, murder. All police shootings go through the Police Complaints Authority and the Office of Professional Responsibility. Is that or is it a situation where the crime chief could immediately institute charges against the culprit?
Okay, what normally happens in cases like this is that they gather the information quite quickly. It gets sent to either the police legal advisor or the director of public prosecutions, and they tend to turn it around very quickly. I'm assuming that the Office of Professional Responsibility got involved because this was a shooting by a police officer purportedly in the execution of his duties. So that's probably why the OPR got involved. Police Complaints Authority has some jurisdiction to investigate, but whether or not either of these bodies is involved, that's not an excuse for the extraordinary delay that we've seen so far.
Absolutely no excuse at all. I noticed there's a Lenroy Williams is saying 1 year now we can't get justice for the Henry boys.
That's true.
Yeah. What's going on with that now?
Well, as you know, Mark, they've charged 2 young men allegedly who gave confession statements, like in Brickdam. If you look at all the scientific evidence that exists, it certainly does not point to any responsibility in the part of either of those persons for the death of Joel or Isaiah Henry. So we're going through the charade of a preliminary inquiry. The only evidence that the police have or claim to have is an alleged confession by one of them. As you know, the magistrate had thrown out the case against one of these gentlemen who was charged, and the DPP has brought it back. So we continue to go through this, this pretense of some sort of a trial based on a confession statement.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that a magistrate thrown out the confession statement. It was dead. It was done with. Yet the DPP's chambers brought back charges against those same suspects using the same evidence. Nothing new. Or do they have anything new?
No, nothing new there. That case stands and falls by a confession statement. And I think, as everybody knows, there were great protestations from the 2 men charged, saying that they had nothing to do with it. They had been beaten and forced to give the confession statement. Of course, I think the most damning part about those confessions is there's a complete lack of any evidence to support. And when I say evidence, I mean independent forensic evidence to support the alleged confession.
All right, if you're now joining us, it's 13 minutes after 7 o'clock with us, attorney at law Nigel Hughes. We'll get to the main subject matter this evening, which is the Brickdam police station. 95% of it just gone, done with, finished with. Some controversy surrounding the after, in other words, the cleanup after. But before we get to that, though, here's what I want to quickly ask about. I know that some members of the Henry family, they were arrested, they were charged because they had alibis and so forth. What's going on with that matter, sir?
That matter is slated to continue next week up at the Blairmont Magistrates Court. As you know, several family members who were on the day when Mr. Harris Singh was murdered had gathered at the house mourning, confirmed the presence of some of the accused persons, and when they went to give statements, they were arrested. I think your audience is well aware of that. So that trial continues next week.
All right, next week that trial.
Matter of fact, one of them sure. Continues tomorrow. Actually, sorry about that.
Tomorrow. I know you guys had a success in a big case, and I saw you on Facebook thanking one of your junior lawyers there, Mr. Daniels. What case was that?
Oh, yes. Sorry. Yes. Well, you remember Dr. Frondenberg, who was the lead forensic anthropological expert in the world, was brought to Ghana through the good courtesies of the Ghana Human Rights Association. And he held a presentation at the Brickdam Cathedral, which was attended by the Henrys. And then on their way home back to West Coast for Beast, they were stopped at the Sparendam police station, where they were dragged out of the car because young Henry, Colvin Henry, did not provide them with the original driver's license because he left it home, but he had a photocopy. The police refused to accept that. Assaulted, beat him. You've seen the graphic images of him bleeding. His mother blacked out several times. and the police then charged them with various incidents, disorderly behavior, obstructing the police in the course of execution of their duties. And those charges were filed at the Brickdam Magistrates Court. And Mr. Daniels from our firm represented the Henrys, both Gail Johnson and Colvin Henry, and those charges were dismissed whatever date was that I might have mentioned in the statement. And I certainly want to commend the work of Mr. Daniels.
All right, and commend the work of Mr. Daniel as well, and yourself and others. Kudos to all of you. Let me ask you this: with all these matters, all these cases, these high-profile cases and so forth, and even coming on interviews and so forth, when do you have time to rest?
I get there. In between days, some people will say I sleep during while I'm at work. I take the sleep when I can.
All right, let's move on to this stuff here now. The fire, the Brickdam Police Station, a place that you are very much familiar with. And here it is no more. Over the past 24 hours, have you been able to digest the reality?
Mark, this is really quite a devastating fire. It's the entire block, save and except the building that had the barracks where the police officers lived, that went up in flames completely. Today, of course, we had to take measures because our buildings were affected. Both of them caught, actually. So we went back today to make sure that all the systems were up. Most of our stuff is in the cloud. And when I went there, most of the debris had been removed. There were big pieces of heavy-duty equipment in the compound, moving away all the debris. This is not even a little small dozer. These were big pieces of equipment moving away the debris.
Are you surprised, as a lawyer, you know that certain procedures need to be taken? Are you surprised that just hours after the fire that all those things have been graded up and what is supposed to be the crime scene has been tampered with, even without a proper investigation?
Let me say this. Certainly, I think by any standards, that fire would have been treated as suspicious in origin. And under any standards, it would have been a crime scene. Now, I don't know many crime scenes that cease to be a crime scene, particularly where the second most important police station in the country is consumed by fire, that you would remove all the potential opportunities to determine the cause of the fire before the expiration of 24 hours. That is extremely suspicious. It certainly doesn't raise the confidence of anybody in the actions of the Guyana Police Force. As a matter of fact, I think it now adds an entire layer of suspicions to the operations of the Guyana Police Force, which of course impacts upon people's confidence in them. This is less than 24 hours. I was at my office, 10 o'clock this morning. I saw Minister Ben inspecting the fire hydrant that they told us yesterday that wasn't working, which the residents got to work, and went up the road and I saw these big pieces of heavy-duty equipment that were clearing away the debris less than 24 hours after the investigation. And that, at a minimum, Mark, even with the best forensic skills in the world. So assuming you had Scotland Yard and you had the Federal Bureau of Investigation and you had NSA or whoever else from the United States or wherever the best forensic evidence experts may be located, it's difficult to comprehend how less than 24 hours after a fire at the second most important police station of the country, you would be removing debris that potentially could contain useful information leading to the cause of the fire.
All right, back to this hydrant. I heard in a live feed that people were upset, and you guys on that day of the fire were telling firefighters that this hydrant works. They were saying, no, it doesn't. But residents in your area, those good Samaritans, they were able to say that it works. And they went and they made it work. How do you feel that firefighters are so in my opinion, incompetent.
Mark, I will only share with you the chronology of events, and I hope that the viewers can draw their own conclusions. As soon as I got the information about the fire at Brickdam, I came to the scene. There were some members of the public there. There was a police officer in a khaki uniform. I went to him and I said, "Sir, this fire hydrant is working," because I saw the fire engines up the road, and some of them were not even being used. I said, "This fire hydrant is working because 3 months before, all of us in the office had seen it with the water coming out. As a matter of fact, it was about 2-3 years ago when they reconnected the fire hydrant. GWI came and they opened it up and it was working. And I know for sure 3 months ago it was operational. So I said to him, "Sir, this is working. Can you convey to the fire officers?" He said, "Yes, Mr. Hughes, I'll do this." I then actually went over and I said to the fire officers, this is the corner of Mansion Place and Hatfield Street. "Gentlemen, the fire hydrant in front of my office is working. You will need it to save the building on the western side of Brickdam, as well as on the southern side, because I was very concerned about the Farley gas station." They said, okay. They came back, they looked at it and said, "Yes, we'll check it out. But they need a fire attendant to come to see if it was working." A fire attendant, Julie, came, they looked at it and they said to me, "It's not working." Shortly after that, I saw several ministers were there. By that time, one of the buildings had caught, and I was trying to douse wet the western wall, the eastern walls of the building. I saw Mr. Nandalal. He was in the middle of a press conference, and I called out to him from the third floor of the building. I said, "Anil, there's a fire hydrant in front of my office that is working. Can you please say to the officers it is working so that they can hook it up and start the fire to attend to the fire?" By that time, what had happened is the embers were coming off of the Brickdam fire. One had landed in the top of a coconut tree right next to the building, and the entire coconut tree caught on fire. And we were concerned at that stage that the tree was going to actually fall on the building and light the building afire. So we had to go find somebody with a chainsaw who cut that coconut tree down. After that happened, the embers were on other parts of the building. Coming back to this situation, I said to Mr. Nandalal, who turned around in his press conference and said, "Look, it's working." So I came downstairs, went to it. Two or three fire officers and a KK'd officer said to me, "Mr. Hughes, the fire people are saying," and the fire people confirmed this in his presence, "that the blue marking on the fire tender means that it is not working." I said, "Sir, if you say so, but I'm just saying to you it had been working." Two residents from the crowd who I know came to me and said, "Mr. Hughes, we could get that thing on. We know how it's working." They went, came back. The police prevented them from trying to get it work by threatening to arrest them. Say, "I can't go and do, how are you going to turn it on with fire people equipment?" They were so incensed because they had come to the view that the fire service was not interested in saving the buildings. That would be all the buildings coming from Mr. Trotman, Mr. Ford, Mr. Barrow next to me, the three that were mine. They came to that and they were incensed that the police were saying this. Despite the fact that the police threatened to arrest 2 or 3 of them, they turned on that equipment, opened it up, turned it on, and out came the water. And clearly the fire service and the police were embarrassed because they were preventing people and threatening to arrest them if they tried to turn it on. And so after that, what then happened was the firemen said, "Well, we need a water pump. The water is flowing this hydrant, you know." They said, "We need a water pump before we could use this hose to douse the building." And I said, "You need a water pump. The water is already coming out. All you need is a hose and a nozzle." So they went and they brought a water pump. They never hooked up the water pump, never connected the water pump to the hydrant. The water was left running there. And by that time, mercifully, the fire was contained. Well, not contained. The threat to our buildings was significantly reduced. And therefore, the necessity to douse the building had been significantly reduced. But that's it. That's your working fire hydrant, where they had threatened to arrest people if they tried to turn it on, which the fire service said specifically, 3 officers. It is not working, Mr. Hughes. The blue paint means it's not working. The sergeant the officer in Keiki, not a sergeant, he would have been hired as a sergeant, who said to me, the fire service said it's not working. There's your evidence. It was the residents who went and got that and turned it on.
Mr. Nigel Hughes, I heard that. I heard exactly what those residents did, and I salute all of them. So if they're watching some of them, go ahead, Mr. Hughes.
No, I was going to say, I am eternally grateful to the relationship I have with the people in working with us. I'm eternally grateful to some particularly strong individuals in that community who, despite all that was going on, were insistent, and they were indignant that no attempt would be, that they were refusing to assist to save our officers. And I intend to show my gratitude. We will have an event next Saturday just to say thank you to them, because were it not for them and their insistence, we would never have known. We would assume that it wasn't working. And there they were.
And the thing, Nigel, is that those people were willing to risk their freedom to prove that it was working.
Absolutely. Mark, these are the people who were coming into my office when the building was on fire, bringing up buckets of water right up to the 3rd floor, saying, "Here, Mr. Hughes, here, Mr. Hughes," and then they went out onto the roof of the building. They go out onto the roof of the building and they're dousing the building, the library, the window of the library started to caught a fire. They put that out. This is an amazing bunch of people. These are men, women, children, everybody lives there. At one stage, we actually had to say we have enough, and just to demonstrate the level of responsibility for these people, one of the elder women in the community took charge of the back gate, and she was only letting in people who she could vouch for. It was when the coconut tree caught a fire. We said the fire service saw the coconut tree on fire in the yard. We said to them, "Look, it's on fire. It's next to the building. This is an old historic building where Dr. Barrow used to be. Come save it." Not a single fireman moved. I had to ask, and I want to salute this lady, Malika Boxill, because she said, "Mr. Hughes, I know somebody with a chainsaw, because I took an axe, one of those axes that I keep in the car for emergencies, and I started cutting the tree, but there was no way I was going to get that tree down before it caught the building." She called somebody in the community. They brought a chainsaw. This guy cut down the tree when the couplets were falling. They were on fire. When it fell down, we put it out. He then cut it up into small pieces. This is just pure community work. Absolutely no assistance from the Guyana Fire Service. A tree in St. Stanislaus compound caught a fire. It was smoking. And it was the people who had to insist that, look, put it out. So I have the highest regard for the people of Working Russ. As a matter of fact, they were the best firefighters yesterday.
The best firefighters. Those are the people who should be the real firefighters. And I'm not knocking all of the firefighters. I know some of them risk their lives as well. But something is definitely wrong with the fire service in Guyana. I heard this morning Mr. Irfan Ali actually talking about hundreds of millions of dollars placed into the fire service, and yet we have this. We have these guys walking around in the fire service painting these fire hydrants in blue, and they're probably not going to double check to see if these things are working or not. What is your take on Mr. Irfan Ali talking and was visibly upset about the hundreds of millions of dollars, but yet citizens are not getting their service from the fire service? Your take on his comment?
Mark, I prefer not to comment on that. And there are many reasons that I prefer not to comment on that. After my experience yesterday with the Guyana Fire Service, this wasn't even a question of resources. This was a question of getting a key and turning on a fire hydrant to save the buildings in the street. Guyana being what it is, I don't even want to begin to say to you what my suspicions are on that, because it wouldn't be responsible. So I don't even want to comment on what Dr. Ali had to say this morning.
Fair enough, and I respect that. but he had a lot to say. And I guess some of our viewers, our listeners, heard what he had to say.
What I will say,
Yeah.
is that after the demonstration of the conduct of the fire service yesterday, it is evident that I think we as a law firm, we have to acquire our own resources to be able to extinguish any fire of any scale. So this week we are going to be, in effect, building our own fire service in our offices, not in the offices, in the compound. We are going to have to add an awful lot of water capacity. We're going to have to buy the appropriate equipment and hoses, because it is clear from the conduct yesterday that the fire service not only not only are incapable, they clearly had clear intent not to save the property. I can only say of the citizens who were in that part of Hatfield Street.
And I'm sorry about that. And we are happy that the citizens did what they had to do to save those buildings, and they are the heroes. I know you said that on Saturday coming, there will be a nice party for them. You and I will speak during the course of the week, and I will hopefully ask your permission to carry that live via Benchop Radio, if you permit. I know you probably
Sure,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. If you're now joining us, it's 32 minutes after 7 o'clock. Those of you who are listening via your radio station, your radios on the ground, my guest this evening, Mr. Nigel Hughes. Mr. Hughes, let's get to this fire here now. And the origin. We don't know the origin, but we are hearing now, Mr. Hughes, we are hearing now that someone has allegedly, and here we go with this confession statement again. When you heard of that alleged confession statement, what was your initial reaction, sir?
Mark, as you know, and you've had the experience, I have had, some experience with the Guyana Police Force and confessions. Even the juries don't accept confessions that are presented by the police in the course of a trial of a person charged. The biggest example of that, and forgive me for repeating it, is the Lusignan trial, where there was a confession and the jury, mixed jury of all races in Guyana, all ages, urban and rural, brought back verdicts of not guilty simply because of the circumstances under which confession statements are obtained. The rest of the world, except Guyana, has reached a stage where you solve crimes based on forensic evidence. You know where the prisons are located, the new cell block. The new cell block is in the northeastern corner of the Brickdam police station. It is concrete. There are no offices below the new cell block. It is a separate, isolated concrete structure from the rest of the wooden parts of the Brickdam police station. And I am unaware of what ventilation shaft any prisoner would be able to put a lighted piece of foam, assuming that he could get foam lighted with a lighter, down any ventilation block that would end up where there are papers that are housed or papers that are stored by the Guyana Police Force. And there are several pictures, including the one that you have up on the screen, which show that the cell block is completely unaffected and the fire started in another part of the compound. Now, I think most forensic investigators worth their salt will say to you that even if you get a confession from the most notorious criminal who is wanted for a particular crime, you need to ensure that you have the forensic evidence to support that confession. Now, in this case, particularly where it is your second most important police station in the country, you would need to find out if there are any ventilation shafts in existence, if it is possible that there would have been ventilation shafts, if it is possible to put anything that is ignited. I'm not even coming to the foam and whether foam can be ignited by a match. Sorry, by a cigarette lighter. If it is possible to even remotely put anything that is ignited down a ventilation shaft that would end up in a room where there are papers. that brings into question several issues. When they designed the cell block, who designed the cell block that would allow that sort of escape of anything that may be potentially dangerous from a cell straight into an office where documents are kept? That must be that whoever the architect, engineer is who designed that, assuming that obtained, which I rather doubt, that would indicate a very high level of negligence. And we haven't even come now to how a ventilation shaft would lead into a room where there are documents. This would suggest that you need several things: plans of the building. You need to check the debris to see where the heat sources were, whether this was how this fire was actually started. Were they incendiary devices? What were the triggers? Location, of course, being important. And then secondly, could the material which was alleged to have been in that location, was that material capable of reaching the level of flammability, for want of a better word, that would have led to that sort of rapid spread of the fire throughout the entire building? It is evident that the police didn't have an awful lot of time, because they certainly didn't save a lot of the documents and other things. Of course, they say they moved the ammunition and some of the documents. Excuse me. But I mean, all of these things would have to consume, at least, I think, in my experience, a minimum of a week of the best forensic experts to be able to say that if what is allegedly contained in a confession statement is accurate. No, I would shudder to think that the police say somebody has confessed, and you always have to ask people what's the motive for confessing, to burning down the police station, and therefore they consider the investigation over and closed less than 24 hours after the incident, close to the extent that you conduct no apparent forensic investigation. That really is a very interesting thing.
You know, Mr. Hughes, you made a valid point about this cell block, somewhere that I'm very familiar with. And you're absolutely correct, without ever being a guest there. And I was a guest right there dozens of times. It is impossible for anyone to put, according, let's go to Stabrook News, sorry. Information reaching Stabrook News revealed that during questioning, 2 prisoners who were in the Brickdam lockups when the fire broke out claimed that after they noticed the fire and were evacuated from their cells, Green reportedly told them that he had taken a piece of sponge, wrapped it up in a piece of wire, and set it alight. So now, look at this as we continue. Green, they said, then allegedly pushed it through a ventilation, a ventilation hole, to a section of the station which contained some documents. The sponge came into contact with the documents, causing the fire. Now, Mr. Hughes, I know you're a serious lawyer. I don't want to laugh. I don't want to make this a mockery, but I really do have to laugh, especially at this part. The sponge came into contact with the documents, causing the fire. Now, take a look. I want our listeners to take a look, our viewers to take a look. This is how all of the cell blocks, or most of them, look like. Now, I don't know what they're talking about, or where can a prisoner or a detainee put a sponge on a piece of wire, light it, then push it up somewhere where documents are kept. And then when that happens, even if, let's say, that is the case, don't you think that fire would have been all over where that red marking is? But what we are seeing from this piece of evidence, which is from the beginning of the fire, we saw no evidence of fire coming out from anywhere close to where the cell blocks are. Nothing at all.
The other thing, Mark, is beneath the cell block, There are no police officers with paper. I am unaware of that. You have a reception area that you go to. There is a gate or a door that separates you from the cells on the ground floor. I understand they have some problems with it. And then there's cells upstairs. So for it to fall through a ventilation block into an office where they allegedly were papers, I can't imagine what office that would be. And who's going to put an office beneath a cell block?
Well, right about that. Go ahead, Mr. Hughes. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I say you got to be a genius architect to say that beneath a cell block you're going to put officers of the police force with documents.
But not only that, I want to see what this guy Green looks like. He's got to be a genius to know that documents are over there, and that if you take a sponge, you light the sponge and you push it through a hole, and then you curve it back whilst there's fire on the sponge, that you're going to get some documents right there and start burning the station down.
And then the question obviously is, they check everything that you let into the station. So why are they giving a lighter to some prisoner to smoke in the cell?
Well, I'll say this to you, Mr. Hughes. I'll say this to you without being a snitch. Lighter is the least of the sort of contrabands that get in there.
Oh no, of course, absolutely, I understand.
But even if let's say the lighter, the story doesn't add up, Mr. Hughes. All of our listeners, all of them would agree. Look at this again. Green reportedly told them that he had taken a piece of sponge, wrapped it up on a piece of wire, and set it alight. Continue. Green, they say, said then allegedly, Green, they said, then allegedly pushed it through a ventilation hole to a section of the station which contained some documents. The sponge came into contact with the documents, causing the fire. I don't know, Mr. Hughes. This is a Jim Cock Bring Ram Goat story. I want to see what Mr. Green looks like. I want to know, we all want to know whether Mr. Green actually made that confession statement.
Well, the other thing, in addition to that, Mark, of course, we'd like to see what he looks like, and is that you know that where there are notorious events, particularly criminal events, a lot of people rush forward to say it's them because they're trying to get some sort of recognition. That's one of the reasons they don't actually publish the names of people in other countries, because a lot of people do these things for political and other purposes and rush forward to say, you know, the bombing, and we did it, we did the bombing, you know, that killing, I was the one. Because, of course, you know, they want to attract to themselves some sort of credibility in the criminal world. So there's no way, whatever Mr. Green may look like, anybody would seriously take a confession by this person less than 24 hours after the event, with any seriousness, to have abandoned any other investigation, even if it's just to confirm what Mr. Green said.
But, you know, also, apart from wanting to be the star, to say that, yes, if in fact Mr. Green did that, and he didn't, just to put himself in the news and so forth. This guy seemed to be a regular, it's not like it's his first arrest or these sort of things. For him to just be in the lockups a couple hours, and according to police that he was just frustrated. Couple hours? I could understand it if it's a first timer. And that first timer, you know, if they can't take it, they will be suicidal. They will get so frustrated. I'm going to burn down this place. I got this. It doesn't happen. I have been in there dozens of times. It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Right? And so I cannot believe this story from the police. Now, you have dealt with, and you know, I worked along with you on some cases where persons, the police said that those persons gave a confession statement. When in fact they were tortured. Do you think that any sort of threats, any sort of threats made to this guy Green? We're just speaking hypothetically.
Mark, you know, I never want to fuel speculation when I'm unaware of the actual facts. So this is not a case where I've heard from Mr. Green or relatives of Mr. Green who have said that he has been he's been induced to make these statements. And of course, I think we run the risk of degrading the seriousness of this fire and its impact on Guyana by fueling speculation. I mean, this, at the end of the day, whatever your views are on the Minister of Home Affairs, whatever your views are on the Commissioner of Police, whatever your views are on the current turmoil that is clearly taking place in the Guyana Police Force, the Guyana Police Force is responsible for protecting and serving the nation. This is the second most important police station in the country that is completely demolished by fire. Now, before we even go to the implications of what might have been lost, what information might have been lost, and the consequences of it, it is only matched in its scale and scope by the fact that they would abandon the investigation less than 24 hours after, based on an alleged confession of a what seems to be a habitual criminal, that you would then remove all the evidence that is likely to confirm or lead elsewhere to what this man has said. This is truly unbelievable. And whatever your political views are, if this happens and it is allowed to pass, then it means that, you know, we are in a really difficult place as a country. Because if we can lose such a national institution and remove all the potential sources of information that would lead us to trying to solve this, then we're in a bad place. We're in a really bad place.
Even if Green confessed, we don't know why he made that confession. We don't know whether it's true or not. I think I agree with you. I heard you earlier say that the investigation should still be conducted for the next 48 hours or even 72 hours to find out whether the confession statement given by Green is indeed accurate. They have never done that. They start to bulldoze everything right away.
Mark, let me just say as a defense lawyer, if I was Green's the defense lawyer and I successfully challenged this confession statement before the court, the police don't even have independent forensic evidence to say what he said is true, or even that it is even possible that there was a ventilation hole and that this is where the ventilation hole is. They don't even have that. So their entire analysis for the destruction of this station is based on a criminal confession, a confession by what appears to be a person who has had several brushes with the law. And therefore, instinctively, you would have very grave reservations about what he's saying.
Precisely. I got your point on that, but the police, they're not concerned about that at all. But let me say this to you. At 48 minutes after 7 o'clock on this day, Sunday, the 3rd day of October, that in less than 48 hours, again, I repeat, in less than 48 hours, we will possibly hear Mr. Green say that he didn't give a confession, he didn't make a confession to the police about this crime, that the police wrote on a piece of document, a paper, and asked him to sign it. He is going to say that he cannot read and write. He is going to say that it was done under duress. So watch out for the next 48 hours when Mr. Green is given access to an attorney. What happens if that turns out to be the case now? What can the police say? What can the fire service say to the people?
Well, Mark, you know, that is always up to the people. If they are satisfied that their institutions can be destroyed and they're provided with an explanation of the quality that we have been provided with by the Guyana Police Force, and they're comfortable with that, then so be it. You know, this is long past the stage where I am, you know, getting concerned and worked up about, you know, where the country's going. If this is where we are, this is where we are. It's a sad statement to make, but that is the reality of it. If you are comfortable with that sort of management of the affairs of the law enforcement agency, and you're comfortable with that level of service from the Guyana Fire Service, then you, like we are going to do, we are going to make our own arrangements to look after ourselves. So the next time there's a fire close by, we probably wouldn't even call the police, call the fire service. We just hopefully use our own resources to address it. And that's just not for the law firm. That's for any building in working with us, because we will work with that community to try and at least develop some capacity in the community to look after yourself if you are in similar difficult circumstances, because it is clear from the position adopted by the fire service that it is not of their highest priority.
Quickly, because I promised you just 1 hour, and we're approaching the 8 o'clock hour already. You have attended 2 secondary schools, St. Stanislaus and Bishops. St. Stanislaus is now temporarily a police station. What is your take on the police station activities will now be conducted at St. Stanislaus College?
I don't know. Is this going on while school kids are around? I mean, you know, there's so many. What I understand is the urgency and the necessity, perhaps, for the operations of the Brickdam police station to be moved somewhere. They've moved them to the tarmac of the St. Stanislaus police station, which is physically, St. Stanislaus College, which is physically next to the police station. I mean, as I'd be biased as an Old Saints person to say I'm concerned, but I don't know how secure, what sort of measures have been taken to protect the information that they would have at that location. The whole records office for firearms, all those kinds of things, all those records are gone. I would have hoped by now, Mark, if I could just say this, that a lot of those, I was hoping that we had reached a stage where a lot of that information is stored up in the cloud, so that when we lose the actual physical documents, you know, we're not completely impaired. But in relation to your question there, I suppose it's a question of proximity. It's a question initially of where else they could go. The school is a government school. The government is in control of the compound. And I suppose under some of the powers vested in them, emergency powers, they can do it. It's not up to me as a citizen looking on without access to enough information to comment critically on it, at least not at this stage.
All right, we're looking at the time. Again, this is just an hour about the fire at the Brickdam police station. You heard, you saw. This is what the end results on the station looks like. This is the end result. But the main thing is this confession, this alleged confession statement. I don't know, whoever Green is, if I have any contact to a James Bond movie, I would love to see Mr. Green star or becomes the next James Bond, the next 007. I don't know, but this is comical, that confession statement. I give them 48 hours before they say something else, and that when we hear from Mr. Green is going to say, no, he didn't do that. The policeman wrote something on a piece of paper, and he can't read and write, and he signed it. Remember this date, 53 minutes after 7 o'clock, October 3rd. Mr. Hughes, before we go, I'll allow you your closing remarks, please.
Mark, I of course, I'd like to express again my sincere gratitude to the people of Working Rust, all of them who came out and did what they did to save those buildings, to protect them. We wouldn't have had them here. It would have been a different conversation. I probably wouldn't even have been in the program. I just, as a Guyanese, even in our difficult circumstances and divided as we are, I am concerned as a citizen that one of our major law enforcement institutions, second most important station in the country, could be lost by fire in the manner in which it was lost, and that less than 24 hours after, we would elect to remove all the possible sources of information that could have led to an independent assessment of how the fire might have occurred. If we've reached that stage as a country in relation to our law enforcement institutions, then its implications for lesser, not institutions, but lesser matters of what would apparently be lesser importance, is really, really frightening. It really is scary that we're at this point. Really is very, very, very disturbing. And I would like, of course, to publicly acknowledge all the ancestors that came out yesterday and said, no, not us, not this time. I appreciate that.
Not this time. Not us, not this time. Next Saturday, I'll be carrying live that event that you have, that appreciation that you'll be showing for residents around your office area there in Work in Rust. Thank you so much for doing and reaching out to those people, those heroes. Thank you so much, Nigel, for all that you do for Guyana. And thank you so much for coming out and rescuing me from that Brickdam police lockups there on many occasions. It was a second home for me. And in almost all of the cells got my initials, MB. All of those things gone up in flames, my initials gone up in flames. As I remember the Brickdam lockups, one evening, the police decided to put me on some $50,000 bail. I think it was approaching 1 o'clock in the morning when I called you and you were willing to head out of your bed to come and ensure that I was bailed. Lots of memories at that police station. Here it is, walking out there with Lincoln Lewis, Norris Witter, and Mr. Ramjatan.
Ramjatan, yeah.
And the police station, the lockups, no more. Nigel, thank you for your time, man.
Thank you. Walk safe and stay, walk in the corner. Thank you, and thank you to your guests. Have a good evening.
Yeah. All right. In closing, again, I go back here. This is inside. All of the lockups are like this, and the cells in the lockup there at Brickdam Police Station. So there's no ventilation. There's nothing there that anybody could push a sponge through on a piece of string or whatever they're saying. It's just not possible. You cannot push a string with a fire and then curve it back to go into an office and set that office, and knowing that documents are sitting right there. This guy Green has got to be a genius. And the CID rank who actually told us that there was a confession statement, I'm not going to believe that confession statement. I tell you guys straight up, I'm not believing that confession statement. And look at what they're saying. Green says, then allegedly pushed it through a ventilation hole to a section of the station which contained some documents. The sponge came into contact with the documents, causing the fire. I do not believe this statement at all. I just do not believe the statement. And look at when the fire started. I wonder where that sponge went. I wonder where that string went. Maybe probably all the way to the third floor, all the way over on the other side. That's got to be some good sponge. I want to see that sponge. I want to see that string. I want to see that fire that this guy Green started. Watch out for 48 hours from now. Green is going to say that he can't read and write, and the police basically threaten him to make that confession statement. 48 hours. Just watch it. There's been stories behind that. They tortured individuals, and those persons gave confession statements that were not true. Shaka Chase, is one of them. They tortured the young man. He confessed. Come to find out that it was not a true confession. They tortured a woman from Tiger Bay to confess that she saw Shaka Chase. Turns out that she was forced because she was tortured into making a confession statement or giving a confession statement. So there's history behind these so-called confessions. So watch out for Mr. Green saying that it wasn't he. When he says that it wasn't he, the police now will have to sponge up the entire situation because they will end up looking like fools. All right, until tomorrow, same place, same time, right here on 107.1 FM. Thank you all for tuning in, and thanks to our guest, Mr. Nigel Hughes. Thank you so much, Nigel. And thanks to all of you. God bless you.
It's hard to be at peace with the ones who are so discard. It's hard. Them have a knife in your back and them smile it so broad. Help me to deal with the ones them who said them love me when them really don't. Help me to deal with the fans them kill me flesh when the crowd a shout. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Help me on the battlefield. Cause the booby traps with them set is real. I never want to take your glory, Lord. Send your angels to encamp around about me and stand guard. To envy is so easy and to love it is so hard. Let me work for your glory and not for the award. Don't make me ever get caught up in the scream and the applause. And go talk about the blessing and not talk about the Lord. All these things are vanity. I need your reward. Let me be real. Don't put on no facade. Help me to deal with the ones them who said them love me when them really don't. Help me to deal with the fans them kill me flesh when the crowd a shout. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Help me on the battlefield. Cause the booby traps with them set is real. Sticks and stones can break my bones and words can harm me. They can harm me. When the evil come against me, you'll protect me. You'll protect me. Father, I need the strength of your son. Cause you know my work is not done. Lord, I need that endurance just to finish this race that I run. Help me to deal with the ones them who said them love me when them really don't. And help me to deal with the fans them kill me flesh when the crowd are shout. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Help me on the battlefield. Cause the booby traps with them set is real. You tell me to stand firm. Cause every little plan you have a confirm. I know them evil plan turn. In a darkness me a the lantern. So help me to deal with the ones them who said them love me when them really don't. Jesus, help me to deal with the fans them kill me flesh when the crowd a shout. Help me on the battlefield. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Help me on the battlefield. Cause the booby traps with them set is real. Help me to deal with the ones them who said them love me when them really don't. Help me to deal with the fans them kill me flesh when the crowd a shout. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Help me on the battlefield. Cause the booby traps with them set is real. Help me to deal with the ones them who said them love me when them really don't. Help me to deal with the fans them